Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Okay, let's just jump right in today. We're looking at a story that, well, you probably think you already know inside and out, but we are going to look at it through a totally different lens today. We're talking about the genesis of a literal legend, the engineering of a titan building the Titanic. We're going to see exactly how this crazy, bold idea on paper actually became the largest moving man-made object of its time.
So, picture this. It's April 1912, and you're in Southampton. Towering above the dockside, standing ready for her maiden voyage, is the Titanic. She seemed almost unreal in scale, right? Just an absolute marvel of modern engineering. But to really grasp what a massive achievement this was, we kind of have to forget this pristine, finished image for just a second. Because if we jump back just 3 years prior, to 1909, she didn't exist at all. Literally nothing. There was only an empty slipway in Belfast and a massive engineering challenge that at the time, no one had actually fully solved.
Which brings us to Section 1, a challenge of scale. Now, the shipbuilding world back then was fiercely competitive, but the White Star Line made a really deliberate, actually pretty surprising choice. Instead of chasing speed records, which is what everyone else was doing, they bet the whole shebang on size and luxury. They planned this trio of colossal Olympic-class ships, the Olympic, the Titanic, and the Britannic.
But here's the catch. To build ships of this unbelievable size, the existing infrastructure simply wasn't going to cut it. The task required the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast to completely redesign and transform the entire shipyard itself, well before they could even lay down a single piece of the actual ship.
Moving on to Section 2, raising the steel skeleton.
So how do you physically build something that massive? Well, engineers had to build the Aral gantry. This wasn't just some temporary scaffolding. It was a permanent, massive steel structure that stretched entirely across the yard. The gantry was an engineering marvel all on its own, and it was the absolute only way workers could lift heavy materials and assemble the ship at this totally unprecedented scale. And just to put that unprecedented scale into perspective for you, over 880 feet. That was the jaw-dropping length of the vessel they were preparing to build. So yeah, they absolutely needed that colossal gantry just to reach the incredible dimensions of what was coming.
In 1909, construction officially begins. But, before she was famously known to the world as the Titanic, she was just known to the men who built her by a number, 401. That was her yard number when they reverently laid down her keel, the massive steel backbone of the ship.
From there, she slowly started to rise into shape. First, laying the keel to set the foundation. Then, adding steel frames one by one to create this giant open skeleton reaching up into the sky. And finally, hammering in the rivets to turn that open framing into a solid, impenetrable hull.
And guys, making that hull solid was punishing work. We were talking thousands upon thousands of rivets, hammered and fitted entirely by hand. Just try to imagine the environment for a second. The constant, deafening noise of metal slamming on metal, the intense, stifling heat of portable furnaces getting those rivets glowing red, and the immense pressure to make sure this colossal structure was completely watertight. It was just relentless, grueling physical labor.
All right, Section 3, a floating construction site.
Fast forward to 1911. The project reaches a highly anticipated milestone, the launch in Belfast. The Titanic touches water for the very first time. It was a massive triumph for sure, but she was incredibly far from finished.
To an observer standing on the docks, looking at her silhouette, she probably looked totally complete. But inside? Actually, scratch that. She was essentially a massive, ongoing floating construction site. For nearly another full year after her launch, she was basically just an empty steel shell sitting on the water. Over that next year, workers had to install literally everything. The heavy, complex machinery like massive engines, giant propellers, sprawling boiler rooms. But at the exact same time, they were crafting delicate luxury. Intricate grand staircases, miles of cabins and corridors, and all those opulent passenger spaces. Turning an empty floating hull into the most luxurious liner of its time required absolutely staggering coordination.
Which leads us to our final part, Section 4, 3 years, few hours.
Finally, by April 1912, she was ready. The sheer monumental human effort was complete. 3 complete years of relentless engineering, millions of hand-driven rivets, and the sweat and skill of tens of thousands of workers had successfully turned mere drawings into the absolute largest ship of her time.
But it's a really striking, almost heartbreaking contrast when you step back and look at it. 3 entire years of groundbreaking engineering, of noise, heat, and physical sacrifice, weighed against just a few short hours at sea. The massive, multi-year genesis of this ship is entirely eclipsed by her tragically brief time on the water.
So, it leaves us with a really big question to chew on. How much history is lost when we only remember the end of the story? The tragedy of the Titanic is unforgettable, obviously, but so too is the incredible, often overshadowed triumph of human labor that brought her into existence in the first place. Thanks for joining me on this explainer today. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.